Hi there everyone, Lars here with another Nagatoro review brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And in this particular review, I want to do kind of a special look at what the most recent episode of Please Don't Tease Me, Miss Nagatoro has shown us. And that is that Nagatoro herself, Hayase Nagatoro, has come a really long way in terms of her own personal progression, and I feel like that's an element of the story that is not highlighted enough, and yet it is indeed there. So what I want to do is I kind of want to do first a look at how far Nagatoro's come and what the most recent episode and what the upcoming episodes honestly mean for her as an individual and for her own character arc. Now, one of the things that has to be understood about this story is that we are seeing most of the events through the eyes of Senpai. This is mostly his story. We're watching him grow as a character, overcome his various foibles, weaknesses, anxieties, issues, to become a much better person and to fall in love with Nagatoro, and as well to redeem what seemed like a very toxic relationship and turn it into a very wholesome and healthy one. But because we see everything really through his eyes, it's very easy to miss just how much Nagatoro herself grows. So when we look at it, the very first time that we meet Nagatoro, we don't realize just how complex of a character she actually is. Because as far as Senpai is concerned, everyone is just kind of the same. A bully in waiting, which is what Nagatoro seems to confirm herself to be after having a look at the manga that he is drawing for his own fun. It seems like she is teasing him, and not only teasing him, she goes into full-on bully mode and just absolutely breaks this guy. And not only that, from that point on, she just is shadowing him. And yeah, he kind of brings a little bit upon himself by being like, oh, here's your handkerchief that you gave me the other day. I've cleaned it and I've returned it back to you. And then it's just like, oh boy, this guy is going to be some fun. So at first it seems like we just have our classical one-dimensional bully right here. However, this begins to change once Senpai and Nagatoro have an opportunity to really be alone, and that is after a massive storm blows on through, Nagatoro brings Senpai on over to her house to dry off, clean up, and while they wait for the storm to pass, they play a video game together. And what we see right here is that there's a whole lot more to Nagatoro than just simply the teasing and the bullying. There is more to this girl. A lot of guys won't necessarily think that a pretty girl like her, who obviously does sports, is going to dedicate a whole lot of time to playing video games, and yet that's what she does. She's not necessarily a pro gamer, but she knows what she's doing and she can have fun with Senpai. And in that particular setting, they're able to have genuine conversations. It's not just simply bullying and teasing like it is at school. It's a completely different environment, bringing out a completely different side to Nagatoro. Now, normally, the way that we would look at this is that, oh, this is just Senpai learning that Nagatoro is a complex, multifaceted character, and that's usually how these stories go. But for Nagatoro herself, this is actually a big step right here. She has invited a guy that she likes to her house and is carrying on honest conversations with him. This is a step right here. She has demonstrated before that she's easily able to put any sort of guy into his place, but to be able to have an honest, friendly conversation with someone else is in and of itself a big step forward, and we see that it requires Nagatoro to kind of break a little bit out of her shell. We also get more of Nagatoro's development when we get around to the summer festival, where she puts herself out there a little bit more. Yes, Nagatoro has rushed to Senpai to bully him or to be by his side or whatever in the past, but right here, Nagatoro is suffering basically embarrassment from her friends and from other people around her to be around the guy that she likes. And here she's able to express some pretty insightful wisdom as far as budding relationships go, that if you want to be around someone, you have to be honest, which is something that she herself kind of has to take to heart. It's easy to say a wise thing as a teenager, but then living said wise statement is another matter entirely, which is something that we get to see her slowly do more as the story progresses. Now, one place in which we can definitely see that Nagatoro has not greatly improved is the matter of her basically being a stalker for Senpai, or better yet, I should say, her jealousy for Senpai. So when Sakura has her issue with her own stalker and wants to put together this elaborate date to dissuade her stalker by going out with Senpai, oh boy, that just flips all of the wrong switches for Nagatoro, and she just becomes a beast. And this is an issue that she hasn't really overcome, and at least within the anime, we see that this is something that she continues to struggle with, and as far as the manga goes, it is still a big issue that she has to work to overcome. Now, it makes sense. If you like someone, you're going to be jealous when they're around other people who might be perceived as a threat. Yet within the manga itself, we actually do see that Nagatoro has to learn to have confidence in herself and in Senpai, that she's able to overcome this weakness on her own. The anime isn't that far yet, but this is something that's neat for the anime to cement as an issue for her and something for her to later on overcome. We then get the cultural festival itself, which is a pretty big and important moment for Nagatoro, where she isn't just simply risking embarrassment in front of her friends and in front of strangers, but in front of the entire school by supporting Senpai. Even though we know that Nagatoro is a free spirit and does what she wants, this is still a really big step. This is something I've brought up before when looking at Season 2, is that we have to understand Japanese society, and really putting yourself out there like this draws all sorts of attention towards you, and it could be very negative. This shows a sense of self-sacrifice, which is more so than we've seen ever before. It takes really great mental fortitude within Japanese society to do something like this, which shows great strength on Nagatoro's part, and something that she might not have had in the very first episodes or chapters of the story. And then as we transition on over into Season 2, we see Nagatoro really kind of flexing those growth muscles a little bit more by not just simply going out on a zoo date with Senpai, but learning how to draw. It's not easy to do something that's completely outside of your wheelhouse and be willing to let someone that you like see you potentially fail. That is big, and she's able to do it. And this is something where if we pay attention to the subtleties of Season 1, that's probably something that Nagatoro would not have been able to do before the cultural festival. The cultural festival allowed her to really get out of that comfort zone. And now that she's outside of her own comfort zone, she is able to accept this challenge, which is to draw animals at the zoo and show off her drawings to Senpai. She, of course, is very good-natured about it and everything, but still, this is something that any regular person would go through. It's embarrassing to potentially not be the best in front of the person that you like. And then I do enjoy that we get back to the video game story right here, that we see that Nagatoro has gotten better at playing video games. And while this might not be necessarily massive character growth, look, I can play video games better, I can button mash better than you, haha. No, what it shows right here is it shows that Nagatoro is continuing to improve and grow in various aspects of her life. It's not just everything that has to do with Senpai. Video games exist, and her enjoyment of video games exist outside of her circle with Senpai. So her spending time with video games, making time for video games, shows once again a lot of depth for her character and shows a certain amount of improvement over time. She's not just some stagnant love interest. And then, of course, we get Nagatoro showing up to then take care of Senpai when he's sick, which is really sweet and wonderful, and again shows growth on her part. While Nagatoro has in the past shown concern for Senpai in various situations, going to his house to take care of him is again a big step. Yeah, she went to tease him a little bit, but she was there. She was committed to such a task, to such a moment. And while normally we'll just say, well, that's the duty of the love interest right there, again, it shows character growth. Would Nagatoro really have done that back in Season 1? Probably not. And again, this is taking her out of her comfort zone. And it's not just for the sake of love, but it is growth on her part. And then what I think is a really big, massive step forward for Nagatoro is that she doesn't pressure Senpai into going skiing with her. She teases him, she gives him plenty of opportunities to go with her, but she doesn't pressure him to do it like she would have done earlier in Season 2, or most definitely back in Season 1. She has come to respect his boundaries. And again, this just shows great growth on her part. It's not just her gaining skills or learning to step out of her comfort zone, but it's her coming to understand other people and then applying that understanding in a healthy way. Now then, this all might sound like really subtle stuff from step to step to step. Again, this is mostly Senpai's story, so we'll see most of the growth with him, but we do see a change in Nagatoro herself. She doesn't become a completely different person, but instead she becomes a more rounded character, someone who is more understanding, and as such, she's able to then implement her strengths a whole lot better to improve her relationship with Senpai and the people around her. And while that might not seem really big, it makes a world's worth of difference. If you've watched Nagatoro all the way from episode 1 until now, you'll realize that Nagatoro herself is a completely different individual in terms of how she handles herself than she used to be. And yet, that personality, who she is deep down, has always remained the same. And that is actually a really beautiful balance right there. There's a large misunderstanding when it comes to character development that I especially see with a lot of novice writers and even with some established authors, that if a character grows, they must become someone different than who they were at the beginning of the story. Now, while that works in some stories and probably should happen in certain stories, that shouldn't always be the case. Because if Nagatoro turned into a completely different girl by this point in the anime or manga, would she really have been the person that Senpai fell in love with along the way? Absolutely not, and it would be the girl changing for the guy, and that's not what we want to see. And when we look at Senpai hasn't changed into a completely different person. Instead, he is overcoming weaknesses and foibles and anxieties in order to improve as a person and to be more honest about his feelings, which allows him to fall in love with Nagatoro. And that is a subtle yet profound difference, both in fiction and in real life. So that's a lot of review for the story thus far, but it's important in order to understand what is happening in this particular arc right now within the anime. And honestly, it stretches well into the manga. This will go way beyond Season 2, and it is Nagatoro having to face her greatest weakness yet, and that is that she has internalized her greatest defeats. Just as Senpai internalized the bullying that he constantly received, and it's just like, hey, everyone's just a bully in waiting, and that's why he doesn't recognize anyone's faces, and that's why he's honestly just like, I don't want to be around Nagatoro, and why he conceptualizes, or I should say, contextualizes all of her teasings as just straight up bullying for so long is because that's just what he's gone through, and he is not able to recognize the flirting for what it is. With Nagatoro, we now see that all of these little tiny details throughout the story, especially when it comes to strength, fighting, or sports, all of this is either in a way a compensation for or a way to distract from her greatest defeat in judo. She loved judo, but when she was defeated and could not overcome her rival, she felt like there's no way that she could grow, and as such, she's turned her back on it. Yeah, sure, she might do judo on the side in private, but she's not going to let Senpai or anyone else see it because she's too embarrassed and too deflated and depressed about this defeat. And so that's one of the things I love about this particular arc within Please Don't Tease Me, Miss Nagatoro, is that the roles are kind of reversed right here, where now it's Senpai who is helping Nagatoro to overcome a great weakness, and that is by basically putting himself out there saying, hey, I'm going to take this seriously, at least to some degree. I might not care for it, but I want to do it, and I want to learn how to do judo from you, so please help me out. Will you please set aside this this weakness of yours? And she does it for herself. And one of the great things is that just as with Senpai trying to overcome his anxieties and his problems, it doesn't all just happen within one episode. It's a long process. And for Nagatoro, this is going to be a long process of change and development. This is going to take multiple episodes and multiple arcs going forward before she's in a position to fully challenge this greatest stumbling block in her own personal life, at least as far as she sees it. And that is how she fell out of love with judo. So as I think about this right here, while we praise this series a lot for how Senpai goes from a wimp to Chadpai, we shouldn't forget Nagatoro either. She is a character who goes through her own incredible growth as an individual. And I love how she is handled. Because many times, again, novice authors are all like, okay, I'm going to take this two-dimensional wimpy character and I'm going to change him or her into this amazing person by the end and just develop all of these new facets of themselves that they never knew existed. But what happens if you take a character who's already very complex and you reveal that complexity over time? Now then, that's not character development. That's just learning about the character. Character development is in how an individual applies their strengths and weaknesses in order to become a better person or a worse person than when we were introduced to them. And Nagatoro as an individual has become a way more beloved girl in the course of the entire series, not just by what we've learned about her, but how she has implemented her own experiences and her own learnings in order to become a much more rounded, much more charismatic, and much more understanding individual. And not just towards Senpai, but really towards everyone in general. Even though she has her rivalry with the president and everything, we see that it's no longer pure hatred and jealousy, but it's more just like a, bunny girl, why can't you just put on your clothes for a change? There's now even respect between these two girls right here. And we're just going to get to see more and more of that as the story continues, which is awesome. It's awesome to see this character who seemed just like a one-dimensional bully character who's somehow going to turn into the love interest. It's amazing to see that she was always a very complex character from the beginning, but not only that, she has grown as an individual. And this arc is amazing because it's not just Senpai growing, but it's Nagatoro growing as well. So as far as writing advice for all of our wonderful novice authors out there goes, what can we learn then from Nagatoro's journey throughout these 2 seasons? Well, it's this. Don't write your characters first and foremost as some one-dimensional caricature that you're just going to add stuff to as you write your story. Instead, already come up with a complex character beforehand and then reveal their complexity as the story goes forward. And as you're revealing that, help them to grow along the way. You can use each revelation about some sort of complex facet about their life to then focus on a particular aspect of growth. But even better is this, is that you, rather than just highlighting one element of a person before you move on then to the next chapter, you already learn quite a bit about this individual and you subtly grow them through their interactions with other characters. Now then, that is some pretty high-minded writing advice right there. That's something that you are going to have to work a lot on to do. And so that means you're going to have to write lots of dialogue, you're going to have to write lots of character interactions, you're going to have to write lots of action that puts these characters into situations in which they might not be the most comfortable, they're out of their elements. It takes a lot of work, but believe you me, it is absolutely worth it to have a moment kind of like this where someone who is reading or watching your story just comes to the realization of, oh my gosh, this character has grown so much and I love it. That is one of the best experiences for both the creator and for the audience, is when they have that realization moment. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little review about the growth of Nagatoro and the writing advice that we can pull from it. I'm really looking forward to more of this anime, and especially from the manga, because man, we are in a really fantastic place as far as the manga goes and where the characters currently stand. And if you're looking for more writing advice, then please feel free to check out our other videos here, or you can head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem. Links for that are down in the description below, as well as links to our books that we've published, and also to other resources that can help you along your journey to graduating from novice author to full-on fledged, recognized professional writer, or at least someone who writes good. Yeah, I can English. But until the next video, thank you for joining us on this amazing adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, choose.